Hey, it's Mirna from Trainer's Toolbox. Welcome to the Trainer's Toolbox podcast, a place where you can discover practical and effective tools and tips to make your workshops more insightful, engaging, and memorable. You are at the right place if you're looking to become the best trainer you can be and design truly impactful learning experiences. Ready? Let's dive in. As a trainer, facilitator, speaker, we tend to sabotage learning unconsciously in three different ways. On one side, we overwhelm our learner a little bit, simply because we cannot resist sharing all the amazing things that we can share and all the amazing knowledge. And we try to squeeze in always more in order to give more value. But then very easily, we actually create a sense of overwhelm. Then the second thing that often happens unconsciously is that we actually split their attention in multiple directions. We share different points, we share different visuals, and we just divert attention without even noticing it and not really support them to be fully attentive of the most important bits of learning. And then third aspect, we simply don't make the learning points sticky enough. We don't make them memorable enough. Maybe we make our learning process engaging and it's interesting and it's fun and people are curious, but somehow things just don't stay memorable enough. Now today I'll share with you 6 different tips based on brain-based learning about how can we actually deal with these 3 traps. Now I want to be very clear. I'm not saying we're always doing it. I'm not saying we are all doing it, but I am saying these are the tendencies that really easily slip into the learning and they're really natural human traps that all the trainers and facilitators occasionally slip into. So I want to invite you to listen to this episode today really from the perspective of not so much critically thinking, what am I doing this, am I not doing it, what am I doing wrong. That's not the point. Instead, I want to invite you to think from the 6 things I'm sharing, how could I be doing this even more? Because even if you're doing all these things already well, doing them even more, doing them even stronger, adjusting your learning process to be even a bit more brain-based will actually make learning deeper, stickier, stronger. So they're very much worth incorporating. Even if you suspect you don't fall in these traps so much, these tips will still make your learning process more bulletproof, more sticky, more engaging. Ready? I hope you're ready to start. Now, how do we deal with overwhelm? First of all, there are many ways. Today, I'm sharing just 2 for each of the 3 points, but when we explore brain-based learning, we can go much deeper and explore many more ways of making things more brain-based. So if you will want to explore this topic deeper, definitely check the description of this episode and consider maybe joining me on Train the Trainer, where we work in a very brain-based way, or maybe for brain-based learning course if you're already experienced trainer but you really want to strengthen that aspect of learning. So how do we deal with overwhelm? What can we do to mitigate the sense of overwhelm for our learner? So the best and the simplest way we can do is to consider how can we chunk and cross-connect our learning points a little bit more. So if always looking into every piece of our content, looking into a theory or a piece of information that we would like to transfer to the person, and always asking, can I chunk this into a bit smaller, a little bit more digestible and manageable parts and bits? Can I split this into 3 steps instead of 1? Can I turn this into sort of a model that has multiple parts that then connect? This will make each bit much more digestible and much easier for learner to integrate and remember. But it will also make sure that if they lose one bit of information, they still keep many other bits. But if you're covering everything as a big thing at the same time in more abundant way in terms of wording and information, if something slips, they will lose the whole point. This way, if we are chunking it, if we are making things more modular, even if they lose one bit, even if they lose one point, they will still be able to make sense of most of it. And it will be easier for them to plug right back in at, I don't know, point number 6, instead of once they're lost, they don't really have a way of coming back into the conversation anymore. Now, equally important bit is that we want to cross-connect bits of information as much as we can. That means tie them in together and associate them together. And when we talk about one bit, to still mention and refer to the other bits as well, to show how they're working together, to keep reminding of the bits we mentioned previously. Of course, not in a always classical summary, let me remind you of all we did, but we want to be a little bit more innovative, a bit more creative, and always refer to them in a different ways. But we do want to keep on cross-connecting, and as we're covering new bits of content, keep mentioning the previous ones or giving teasers for the next one and really keeping those connections strong. This will make it more memorable for people while they're soaking in the information, but it will make it much easier for them to actually recall that information later, because it's a little bit like having islands of information and they have many bridges between different islands. So literally people can find different ways of accessing the same information or the same island, instead of needing to, just use one way and then finding that way and always using the same way of accessing it. Now, the second thing that we want to be very aware of when building learning is that overwhelm is a realistic thing. And it will happen, and it's okay that it happens. In other words, our learner will not remember everything we cover for sure. Something will slide off, slip away. Because of this, what is really important is that we pick what are truly our priorities and how can we highlight these priorities a little bit more. And here are some ideas of how we can be highlighting main things. We can highlight them by our voice. Maybe making a bit longer pause or slowing down or speeding up in that part, depending what is our normal rhythm. Or maybe also just being a bit louder and more expressive about that point. We can also highlight it with some engaging, catchy visual that really puts that point forward. But we can also use words such as, if you only take one thing away from today, this one is really the most important thing. We want to use that like maybe up to twice in a whole workshop to really highlight the main bits. I will be sharing some more tips on how we can be highlighting, but the important thing is when we choose what to highlight, we should not be overly ambitious, because if we think everything matters, then actually nothing matters. Everything will get merged together and possibly lost. So we really want to be focused on choosing few priorities that we truly bulletproof and protect and reconnect and cross-connect even more than everything else, and truly highlight to protect them that they don't get lost in the overwhelm. Okay, ready to deal with split attention? So the second challenge, and one that I would say maybe we are as trainers least aware of, is how easily sometimes attention runs away. And I think we all know attention is very volatile and it easily runs away in different directions. But I think we are underestimating how much are we sometimes causing that. And one of the most typical ways where we cause it is in alignment between visual and verbal information we give. You see, as our brains get overwhelmed with information all too easily, there are actually two different channels in our brains which process information separately. One of them is visual and the other one is auditory or verbal, we can call it as well. So our learner at all times will be processing information in both of these channels. And in both of the channels, they'll want to be stimulated but not overwhelmed. So it is really important that we actually think about including both, but at the same time that we don't overwhelm neither. I'll give you an example. If I speak a lot and speak fast, but offer no visual support for the concepts I'm talking about, then I'm possibly overwhelming with verbal information, but visually people are actually bored and they'll, their attention will go around and look around the room and they'll kind of disconnect from my points. On the other hand, if I use visuals, but I use them in a way that's overwhelming. Let's say I put a big slide with a lot of text, and then at the same time I'm trying to talk about something. Or I'm putting a big, very complex image that people need time to process, and at the same time I'm talking a lot. Or maybe I share 4 steps of the process all at the same time on the visual, and then I'm trying to talk about step 1 and explain it really deeply. People are simply not with me. They're not able to follow my verbal information because the visual stimuli took over and it was too complex. So what I want to achieve between my visual and verbal information I'm providing is really this alignment, or something we call congruency. I want to make sure that both visual and verbal information I'm providing are engaging, but neither is overwhelming. And even more importantly, I want to ensure they're congruent in a way that they're supporting the same learning point, right? I want to make sure that I'm not talking about one thing while showing the image of the other or text about the other. I want to make sure they're supporting exactly the same learning point and making it more memorable by using both of these channels. We call this dual channel or dual coding in the concepts of brain-based learning. And then one more thing that I need to be aware with attention, it's a little bit similar as with overwhelm. I need to simply accept people's attention is volatile. People will lose attention, and that's okay, that's normal. What I should not aim for as a trainer is to keep people's attention engaged for 100% of my workshop. So I cannot capture attention and keep it throughout for all the time. That's just not how the brain works. So instead, I want to think about attention from the perspective of re-engagement. I want to keep re-engaging their attention, allowing it to slip away, re-engage it again, a bit like when we're practicing meditation. The point is not to sustain it forever. The point is to keep coming back with our focus to important points. And especially, I want to be mindful to re-engage their attention between those highlights, before these most important learning points, and kind of capture their attention right before to bring it back in. Now, how can I capture their attention? There are again many ways. We're exploring all these way deeper, both in Train the Trainer and in brain-based learning. But the quickest tip I can give you is use element of surprise. Surprise or novelty is the simplest, most powerful hook for our attention. Our brain is made to react to novelty, to surprise, to change in our environment. Because evolutionary, that's where the opportunities was, and that's where the dangers were. So we are really, really focused to react, to surprise, to something that's changed, to novelty. So if you need to get attention quickly, or if it's really important that at some point you get their full attention, use the element of surprise. And surprise can be very moderate. It can be something visually unexpected. It can be unexpected question or trivia fact you impose. It can be just something you do a little bit different. It's about variety. It's about novelty, doing something different, doing something new to bring that attention back. It can be a story as well. There are sometimes powerful surprises. Like, let me tell you a story. People get actually surprised by that idea. I hope this gave you some good ideas how to deal with split attention. Don't worry, I'll summarize the 6 points at the end. I know it's a lot for the brain. So we had 2 on overwhelm, 2 on split attention, and I still want to share 2 with you that are about how to make things more sticky and make sure that they don't just, pass through. We say in Croatian, enters one ear, exits the other ear, when the information just kind of passes through and it doesn't really stick. In learning, we also say content covered is not the same as content learned, where we actually want to say, when we cover a lot of content and overwhelm the learner and don't fully engage their attention, don't make it memorable, the fact we covered that content in the workshop doesn't mean people actually left with that content clear and learned. We have to work harder to make things memorable, or maybe work smarter to make things memorable and sticky. So how do you do that? How do you make things more sticky for the brain? And of course, all of us are tuned into wanting to memorize things and curious about memorizing things. But still, very often it doesn't happen, also because of these first 2 problems, because of overwhelm and because of split attention. But sometimes it just doesn't happen because it didn't, it was interesting, but it didn't really, in a right way, stay with us. There are actually many powerful ways in which we can make information more sticky, but today I just want to share with you two that I would say are kind of the quickest, the most powerful, the easiest to integrate and to use right away. One of them is to use more concrete words than abstract words. So this is really about words we use, not to use as much abstract concepts, but really try to use more concrete words that are sensory oriented, that are things like sensory details, that are maybe things that are visual or where we include some feeling and sense of touch, maybe sounds that we are mentioning, where we describe things and name things in a way that learner can truly imagine them. When brain can visualize something, that makes it so much memorable than if it's just a abstract concept which we cannot visualize. So really think with this, how can I make it more concrete? How can I give it an image? How can I give it a symbol, something that will make it sticky? And very related to it, what makes things really, really sticky is metaphors, stories, and examples. So again, making things tangible, making them vivid, providing metaphors, stories, and examples that actually make things imaginable. And what is imaginable that is memorable? What is colorful? What is unexpected? What has an image and a smell? That's what's memorable. And metaphors, stories, and examples are some of the best ways where we can actually create that. Now, stories actually have an extra layer to it, because stories also bring in emotion into the whole thing, which is a whole different topic. There are some interesting episodes I recorded on that as well, so I will also link them at the end of this episode. Maybe you want to check it out. But stories are that much more powerful that they don't engage only brain, but also the emotion, making things way more sticky with that. Now, I know here I also overwhelmed you a bit because I shared 6 tips, and as I said, there are many more we could explore. And both on Train the Trainer and on brain-based learning courses, we work with really putting these 6 in practice and not just touching on them briefly like now, but really practicing how to do that better. But I do also want to tie these 6 things a little bit together for you and give you some idea how can you actually use them and leverage them all together. So first thing that I would invite you to always think when designing your workshop is, how can I chunk and cross-connect my information more? Once your design is already ready, go back to it and just think, what are the main concepts I used, and is there some space that I chunk them up into a bit smaller bits and steps and then cross-connect instead of using the bigger chunk of theory? That's your first step. Your second step is to ask, what are 2 or maximum 3 of the most important priorities that I really need to highlight in this learning? And then think, how will I highlight them? Will I use voice or visuals or some words? Or will I use some of the things I mentioned that make concepts more sticky? Maybe more concrete words, maybe metaphor, story, or example, or maybe that element of surprise to really highlight the most important things to ensure that people truly remember these. And then finally, check for congruency. Am I using at all elements, visuals, and words in a congruent way? Do I have enough of visual support for all the concept? And is it good visual support? That it's simple and memorable? Maybe it's a photo, maybe it's some keywords, maybe it's symbols, but is it going to make things more sticky instead of split attention and diverge attention? I do want to also invite you here to think from these 6 things: chunking and cross-connecting, highlighting, more concrete, more metaphor, stories, examples, using surprise and novelty, and using congruency between visual and verbal channels. Which of these do I want to pay a bit more attention to use? Do pause here, take a moment to think, how will you actually put this in practice? I hope this gave you some powerful new ideas to make things more memorable. I want to say one of the superpowers of brain-based learning is that it really works in speaking as well. So in most of the trainings I do, we work in more experiential way and really like seeing learning as an active process where people need to be actively engaged. But brain-based is actually one of the rare bits that you can truly use even if you're speaking to an audience of thousands, or if you're doing one-sided presentation or video like me today, and you cannot provide experience in that moment, this will still make your concept so sticky and so powerful. So it's really a powerful toolbox to explore. So I hope you will keep on exploring it. I hope you will put it in practice. And of course, if you want to make it more active and really learn how to use these tips in practice and uncover many more, consider joining me at Train the Trainer, our fundamental course for trainers to really build all of their skills that are necessary for powerful workshop design and delivery. Or maybe on brain-based course, where we just narrowly focus on how to make things more sticky, more memorable, how to engage attention better, and just how to make things more stay with people and make them truly captivating. You can check links for all of these in the description, and do explore some of the other episodes that I'm attaching at the end of this video. Thank you for exploring this topic with me. I hope you found some exciting ideas and valuable tools that you will use already today. Remember, they only work if you put them in practice, but then they make all the difference. If you enjoy Trainer's Toolbox podcast, do leave a rating and review. It does mean a lot. And if you haven't done it yet, click on the links in the episode descriptions and discover free materials and valuable resources to dive in deeper. See you in the next episode or at Trainer's Toolbox newsletter.